Okay, so we're inside this if assert no error. So we successfully have an FTP client. Fine. We check if the user's username is the default username, and if it is, we call assert.len. So we can guess this is asserting the length of something, isn't it?
Yep.
Assert.len t. We always have to pass the t because it needs the power to fail the test, which is also annoying because from our point of view, we don't want to have to keep passing t to things. We just want to call methods on t, don't we? And that's what we do. But we assert.len t, common connections get stats. We already know that's how you get the server to tell you how many connections it's got. So what are we saying here? We're saying assert get stats 1, so we're saying assert that there is one connection, or fail. That's for the default user. Else, the user is some other user, assert exactly 2 connections. What's going on there? I have no idea. If you do, you must be a genius. But we sort of feel if people using this package wouldn't have much idea either, would they?
Yeah.
What we really would have liked here was some t.error message which says, when the user is the default user, there needs to be one connection because explanation goes here. you know, we would dearly love an explanation, and that's where it would go. But there's no place for one. I think if you hover over the assert.len, is there an extra parameter that you can pass, optional parameter to say, yeah, there is, isn't there? You can pass a message. Presumably that's where you'd put your explanatory message. So you can do it, they just haven't, because
Got it.
assert doesn't force you to, it's optional. So that's all right. So, okay, but the behavior that we're testing is if the user is the default user, then the server has exactly one connection. Otherwise, there's 2. Does that mean the default user is always already logged in? Or, if you're connected as a non-default user, then there'll be your connection plus the default users, so there'll be 2. I don't know, and we never will. Fine. What's next?
Next looks like it's setting up a test file path. So it's using the filepath.Join, and it's taking the home base path and the test file name. Then it's setting the test file size to a value, int64 value. Setting the expected quota size to the test file size that we just did above, and setting the expected quota files to 1. Then it's going to do an error equal to create test file, and taking the test file path and the test file size, and asserting, assert that no error t, comma error.
Wonderful. Okay, what's your assessment of what's happening here?
It looks like it's, creating a file on disk, and then it's going to check to see if it's there.
Yeah, like 65,000 bytes long or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Reasonable.
Then it's moving on to setting error equal to check basic FTP, and it's taking the client. So presumably to, check that the FTP client is functional.
Yeah, probably something like can connect, isn't it?
Yeah. Doing the assertion under that assertion, assert that no error t
Yep.
error. And then it's doing another error equal to FTP upload file, and it's going to take the test file path as well as a join path.Join / missing dir and the test file name, along with a test file size and 1 second, client, and then a 0.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 0 of mystery.
Right,
Really
right.
have no idea what that is.
Yeah,
Don't care either.
yeah,
So it looks like, yeah, so we create this big file, probably all zeros or something, and then we try to upload it to the server to a path. What is this? Is the path that we give here, is that the source path or the destination? It's the destination, isn't it,
yeah,
according to this?
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah.
so we're trying to upload this file, which definitely exists, to some directory which putatively from the name we think doesn't exist. It's called
Yeah.
missing dir. And then we say assert.error.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is saying, this should fail, shouldn't it?
Right.
Trying
Right.
to upload a file to a non-existent path should give some error, and that's what we assert. We assert, instead of assert no error, it's assert not no error. Or I think that would be a better name, but it's just assert.error. Fine.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on, then it's going to do something similar, but most likely to a file path that does exist.
Yeah, this is going to be the one that works, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we assert no error there. Fine. And the comment tells us overwrite an existing file. Exactly the same upload again, but now this time it already exists. So what's the behavior that should happen? Well, we assert there should be no error from that.
Right.
So you can overwrite existing files. That makes sense. You actually can do that.
And then it's going to set the local download path. So, and it's using the filepath.Join to.
Yeah, it's going to try and download the same file it just uploaded, isn't it?
And then it's going to, let's see, assert. Yeah, no error. So it's going to say that, yeah, you can download a file to your local.
Great.
Okay. And then, let's see, it's going to set up a user, it looks like.
This is the most sensible bit of code we've read so far, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's all reasonably straightforward, and we can understand
Yep.
what it's doing and why. There was an unbelievable amount of setup and boilerplate to get us to this point.
Yes.
But finally, we're testing something brilliant. Patience rewarded.
Okay, so let's see, it's doing a HTTPD test dot get user by username, and it's going to take a user dot username and a HTTP dot status OK, and it's going to load up a user variable. It's going to ignore something and a error
Yeah,
value.
probably a slice of byte, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then it's going to assert no error on this. And
More assertions.
more assertions, yeah. Assert that equal, and that's going to take the T expected quota files and the user dot used quota files.
Yep.
So looking for some equivalence, it appears.
Same
And
thing
so,
with quota size.
yeah, same thing with quota size.
So what's this testing?
Probably that the file you got back matched what you, or I guess what the source file was.
Well, we're calling this admin interface, aren't we? Or we're guessing this is the admin interface
Sure.
to say, give me metadata about this user. Apparently that includes the used quota files and used quota size. So they have some concept of quota, we can guess. It's like if you can upload stuff, you can't just upload, a zillion terabytes. You have a limit. And the server knows what your limit is, and it also knows how much you've actually used, apparently. So it looks like we uploaded the file, and then we downloaded it and overwrote it and so forth. And it looks like it's testing. If we ask the server, hey, how much of their quota have they used? It should be exactly what we know it must be.
Got it.
It should be like, if quota files is the number of files, that must be 1, isn't it? And
Hmm.
quota size, if that's bytes, it must be 65,000 and change, however big the test file was. It's not quite clear whether this is testing that we uploaded the whole file successfully or that the quota is measured
Sure.
correctly, is it? But either way, if either of those things is wrong, this test should fail. So brilliant. Okay, well interpreted. What's next?
So next is we're looking at the client.rename. So we'll take a test file and a test file name plus 1. So it's concatenating the 1 to the file name.
Yeah, so it's like it's going to try and rename, if the file is called foo, it's going to rename it to foo1, something like that.
Mhm. And then it's going to assert no error on that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we're going to try a delete. So it's going to do a client.delete on the test file name, pass that to an error variable, and do an assert error on this one.
Yeah, apparently that shouldn't work. I guess because it doesn't exist anymore because it's been renamed. So it's like we
Yes.
renamed foo to foo1, now try to
Mhm.
delete foo. That shouldn't work
Right, right.
because there is no foo. Or you could say, what happens when you try to delete non-existent files? Well, it's perfectly reasonable to actually say
Right,
no error, isn't it?
right.
Because
Yeah.
you wanted the file not to exist. Well,
Hmm.
guess what? It doesn't. So
Yeah.
we're all good. That's not how it usually works, though, is it?
Right.
It says, oh, you wanted to delete that file. Well, I'm sorry, you can't because it doesn't. It's like, um, I guess that's important information, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
if you tried to delete it, if you successfully deleted it, you know it was there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you get an error, you say, oh, apparently I've got the wrong name or something. That's
Yeah.
useful to know. And then next, we try to delete foo1.
Hmm. Yeah. Next, we try to delete the renamed file, and that should pass successfully.
Yeah. This is completely reasonable, isn't it? I mean, when
Yeah.
we're constructing tests, this is the way we think too, is we're like, in this case, it's a server that users can connect to and do stuff. What
Hmm.
kind of things can they do? They can upload files, they can rename them, they can delete them, download them, whatever. So we just do a bunch of those things, isn't it?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
sort of assert errors or not as appropriate. So it's like, you could sort of say we're simulating some highly contrived user session
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
this server.
Exactly.
Don't know why the
Yeah.
user would want to do all of this stuff, but
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
could. Um, so we're testing it, that's fine. So what happens next?
So after that, looks like we're going to do another. Uh, let's see. Okay, so we're going to do an HTTPD test.get user by username,
Yeah, we saw this
and
before, didn't we, when
mhm,
we fetched the quota information.
yep,
And it looks like we're going
and
to do the same thing again.
yeah, yeah, and it's going to take the user username and the status OK, and it's going to assert no error on that, and then it's going to look at the quota files. So assert dot equal taking the T expected quota files -1 and user dot use quota files.
Hmm.
And then below that, assert dot equal T and expected quota size minus test file size and user dot use quota size.
Okay, so what does this mean?
I it looks like you're, I guess, changing their quotas by consuming some, like a file or some amount of space. So you're kind of decreasing.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
their quota usage should have
yeah,
changed
yeah, yeah,
as a result of what we did, isn't it? If
yeah.
we uploaded the file and we checked that the server noticed that they now have one file, and X size, and then we deleted it again, and we said they should now have one less file than they did before, shouldn't they?
Right. Yeah.
That is to say exactly 0.
Yeah.
And also their used size should be whatever it was just now, minus the size of the file that we just deleted.
Right.
I imagine that's exactly 0. So we could have said that, but this is another way to say that. But that sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
Yep.
So, fine.
Yep. Then moving on, we're going to use the client.current directory, and we're going to set a cur_dir variable and a error. And then we're going to assert if assert.noError, t_error. If true, then assert equal t/cur_dir. Yeah.
Yeah, I find this a bit confusing.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you know, and I sort of feel like, you know, a lot of times when you're new to a language or even new to programming, you read people's programs and you find them confusing, of course. I mean, you're bound to, aren't you? So you start out by assuming anything you don't understand is just because you don't understand it.
Right.
I don't feel like that anymore. I feel like I should understand it. If I don't, that is most likely the programmer's problem, not mine. It's like, you know, I'm not saying I'm a towering genius. That's for others to say. But I feel like I should be able to understand a piece of Go code. And if I find it confusing, that's a signal that there's something we could do to make the code more glanceable, isn't it?
Sure.
What could we do here?
Let's see.
What are we really saying here? So it's like, so if assert no error from this current dir thing, so that's true if there is no error. So we could phrase it as, you know, if we weren't using testify, we could say, if error not equals nil, fail test. Now we know there's no error, because if there were, we would have failed, so we wouldn't be here, but we're still here. So we know there wasn't, so everything's fine. So now we can say, this value that I got, it should be exactly slash.
Yeah.
That's what we were really saying, isn't it? And the behavior is simple. It's just I should be able to call current dir, there shouldn't be an error, and the value I get should be slash.
Mm-hmm.
No reason to write it in this confusing way. That's another one for my PR.
Okay.
But we're making progress, aren't we?
Yes, yes. So next we're going to set the test_dir value to test_dir. And looks like we're going to use client.makedir and pass in the test_dir value. So probably trying to create a directory.
Yep.
And then it's going to assert no error on the directory creation.
Fine. That I understand.
Yeah. Next is going to be client.changedir and using the same test_dir variable.
Yeah, there's some concept of the current directory, isn't there? Like,
yeah.
if you're just in the shell, you know, you're in some directory, aren't you?
Right.
Which sometimes people find puzzling. I mean, it's amazing, you know, if you've been working in tech or any other industry for a while, you know so much stuff, which is by no means obvious to anyone, isn't it?
Right.
It always just seems like anything you know, everybody must know. It's trivial,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And so you go on feeling like a beginner or even an imposter for quite a while until you meet someone or work with someone who really is new, and you're like, wow, I had no idea I knew so much.
Sure. Yeah.
Which sounds a bit big-headed, but it's just, you know, by virtue of the fact that you've been doing it for a while.
Sure.
There's a saying that an expert is just someone who's one page ahead of you in the manual. And,
Yeah.
and you're like that, aren't you? You just a few pages ahead.
Right.
And you don't realise how much valuable knowledge you've accumulated or how much you have to teach if you want to look at it that way, isn't it?
Sure.
Which is nice. And I'm always coming across this stuff that, like, there's things I know which I think are sort of rare and valuable knowledge. That's the business I'm in, is selling that knowledge to people. And there's also other stuff which I just think, well, of course everyone knows that. you know, no one would pay to learn that, but they do because it's valuable.